All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April 2026 edition of the Southeast Monthly Climate Webinar, where we talk about the climate and special topics pertaining to the Southeast region. My name is Chris Fuhrmann. I'm the Deputy Director of the Southeast Regional Climate Center, and I'll be giving a climate overview of the past month. Our other speakers today are Haley Stuckey from the Southeast River Forecast Center, who will provide a water resources update, Pam Knox from the University of Georgia, who will provide an agricultural impacts update. Joining us today, we're pleased to have Clyde Fraisse from the University of Florida, who will be discussing agroclimate functions and tools for agricultural decision support. So if we can go to the next slide. Sorry about that. Yep, there we go. So again, thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder, type your questions and comments into the Slido app that's in the bottom right corner of your screen. You can do that at any time and they'll be answered at the end. Also, a recap email of this webinar will be sent out with a YouTube link to the recording in the next day or so. All right, so let's get started with an overview of the climate. Next slide, please. And we'll do one more. Oh, back one. Let's see, can we go back one slide? I think we're one too many ahead.
I think there may be a slight delay with the slides.
Oh, okay.
Are you looking for the temperature ranking slide?
Yes. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, I see it. Okay, thank you. All right, so continuing the trend we saw in March, it's been another very warm month across much of the region here in April. Temperatures are running well above average, and as you can see on the left, a number of locations are on track to record their warmest April on record. That includes places like Washington, D.C., in Virginia, places like Norfolk, Richmond, and Roanoke, as well as Knoxville and Chattanooga in Tennessee, and further south into places like Raleigh, Charlotte, and Atlanta. And when you combine the March warmth that we talked about before with what we've seen so far in April, it really adds up. Many of these same locations, places like Raleigh, Charlotte, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Atlanta, they're also off to their warmest start to the spring season on record. And they're not alone. Other locations in the region like Memphis, Nashville, Birmingham, Muscle Shoals, and Greensboro are also seeing one of their warmest starts to the spring. And even parts of Florida rank among their top 5 warmest starts to the spring on record. Now, down in the Caribbean, temperatures have generally been a bit close to average, though a couple of locations in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands that are maybe running a degree or so above average for the past month and also for the spring season to date. Okay, next slide. So in addition to the warmth, the dry pattern that we've been tracking has also continued across much of the region over the past month, and those precipitation deficits are really starting to add up. If you look at the map on the left, which shows season-to-date percentiles, you can see just how widespread the dryness has been. Several locations are now on track to record their driest spring on record. For example, through this past Saturday, Savannah's only picked up about half an inch of rain. That's nearly 6 inches below average. If we go up the coast a bit, Charleston's only received about 0.38 inches so far this season. And it's not just along the coast. If you go down to a place like Gainesville, Florida, they've recorded less than an inch of rain, marking the driest start to spring on record there. And other locations like Augusta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, they've recorded less than 2 inches so far this season. And a place like Columbia, South Carolina, they've only seen a little over an inch. So lots of dryness. We're also seeing similar patterns into parts of Alabama as well, including places like Montgomery and Birmingham. Now, as we pointed out last month, there are a few exceptions to this pattern. As you can see there, parts of South Florida have actually seen some beneficial rainfall, and that's continued into this month. As an example, Fort Lauderdale's recorded over 9 inches of rain so far this season. And West Palm Beach is actually approaching 14 inches. That's more than double what they would typically expect by this point in the spring. If we step back and look at the bigger picture, though, this really isn't just a short-term signal in terms of the dryness. If we look at precipitation going back to October 1st, that's the map you see there on the right, you can see that many locations are experiencing one of their driest such periods over the past 7 months or so. Several places have recorded less than half of their expected rainfall during this time. That includes places like Gainesville, Charlottesville, Virginia, Charlotte, North Carolina, Raleigh, Macon, Georgia. all of which rank as the driest such period in their historical record, some of which go back more than a century. And there's several others. There's quite a long list. You got places like Danville, Virginia, Asheville, North Carolina, Columbus, Georgia, Savannah, Tallahassee, Jacksonville. They've all also received anywhere from a quarter of their expected rainfall to only half of their expected rainfall since the beginning of October. Meanwhile, down in the Caribbean, the pattern's a little different. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands actually continue to see above average precipitation as they start to head into their wet season. Okay, next slide. Now, unfortunately, when you combine that persistent warmth with the lack of rain, it's led to some really significant degradations in drought conditions across the region. As of last week, nearly the entire region is now in drought. In fact, 99.83% of the region is in at least moderate drought. That's a new record for the U.S. Drought Monitor for the Southeast Dews region. That's a record, by the way, that goes back to January 2000. Now, to put that in perspective, the previous record was 87.99% set back in August of 2007 in the middle of that big drought from 07 to 08. And if we just look at the month of April, okay, this year didn't just break the record, it shattered it, okay? The previous record for moderate drought and greater for April was 58.82% back in 2008. And it's not just the extent of the drought, as you can see there, it's the severity of the drought. When we look at severe drought and greater, D2 and greater, coverage reached over 93% of the region. That's also a new all-time record for the USDM, surpassing the previous record of 75% from October of 2007. And again, for April specifically, this obliterates the monthly record, which previously was at 38%. If we look at extreme drought, D3 and greater, nearly half of the region is now in that category or worse. It's not quite as high as the all-time USDM peak of 57% back in October of 2007, but it's still a new April record, and that breaks the previous mark of about 25% coverage from 2012. And if we look at exceptional drought, the worst category of drought in the USDM, we're seeing close to 10% coverage across the region. This is mostly in southern Georgia and the Florida Panhandle. That sets a new April record as well, but it's still below the all-time USDM peak of 37% coverage from October of 2007. So across multiple drought categories, we're either setting new all-time records or April records, and in some cases by a really wide margin, again, in terms of the history of the U.S. Drought Monitor, which again goes back to 2000. Now, there are a couple of brighter spots, okay? It's not all bad. Wet conditions over the past month have led to some improvements across southeastern Florida, where we've seen about a one-category improvement in drought due to the rain there. And down in the Caribbean, with the continued rainfall and closer to average temperatures, there's currently no areas of drought or abnormal dryness there across Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Okay, next slide. All right, shifting gears to ENSO. So as we expected coming out of last month, we're currently in neutral conditions, and the latest outlooks from the CPC a couple weeks ago continue to favor ENSO neutral through the April to June period, with about an 80% chance of that persisting. Now, beyond that, there's a growing likelihood that we transition into El Nino as we move into late spring and early summer, specifically in the May to June timeframe, with about a 60% chance of that occurring. And if El Nino does develop, there's a pretty strong indication now that it could persist through at least the end of the year. But as we've talked about before, this time of year, there's still a fair amount of uncertainty, especially in terms of how strong the event might become. The range of possible outcomes, as you can see, spans from remaining in neutral conditions all the way to a very strong El Nino by this upcoming winter. And that upper end scenario isn't trivial. There's about a 1 in 4 chance of seeing a very strong El Nino, which in technical terms means sea surface temperature anomalies of at least 2 degrees Celsius above average in the central equatorial Pacific. So bottom line is that a transition to El Nino is increasingly likely, but exactly how strong it becomes is still a bit of an open question. We'll see how that evolves here over the next few months. Okay, next slide. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the 3-month outlook from the CPC as we head Through the end of spring and into the first part of summer, we're expecting above average temperatures across much of the region. So that warmer than normal pattern we've been seeing likely to persist in the near term. Precipitation, on the other hand, is a bit more mixed across the interior portions of the region. The outlook is showing equal chances of above or below average rainfall. But if we look along the southern and eastern portions of the region, there's a tilt towards wetter than normal conditions, and that includes much of Florida and the Gulf Coast, and actually extending up the East Coast into parts of Virginia. And that's a little bit of a contrast to what we're expecting across the Caribbean. If we go to the next slide, we'll see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, a little bit of a contrast there in terms of what's going on in the Caribbean. Still expecting above average temperatures, but below average rainfall is expected over the next few months down there. So now if we go to the next slide, looking at the 3-month drought outlook, kind of overall, the expectation is the drought's going to persist across much of the region. But there are a few areas where we could see some improvement, especially where the precipitation outlook that we just saw is maybe a little bit more favorable. So parts of Florida, and even down there, there could be not only improvement, but perhaps some localized removal of drought potentially as we head into the wet season. That could be possible here over the next few months. At this time, I don't show it here, but drought development is not anticipated across the Caribbean. But there are some reasons to maybe keep a close eye on things moving forward. The outlook for the next few months, as we just mentioned, does lean warmer and drier, which could be tied to the development of El Nino conditions later this summer. So while conditions right now are in pretty good shape on the islands, that warmer and drier signal is definitely something to monitor, especially as we move, as I said, into the climatological wet season for the region, where rainfall is really a key part in helping maintain those favorable conditions there. All right, next slide. All right, so as we start to wrap up here, let's take a look at more of the shorter term outlooks. Heading into this weekend and into early next week, we do appear to be in for a bit of a pattern change. After the persistent warmth that we've been talking about, temperatures are expected to drop a bit below average across nearly the entire region. At the same time, we're also expecting maybe a more active pattern in terms of rainfall, with above average amounts likely for several areas. The main exception looks to be the far interior portions of the region, where totals may end up being a bit closer to normal or maybe even slightly below. So overall, a cooler and wetter pattern may be setting up here in the near term, and that could hopefully bring at least some temporary relief to areas that have been dealing with the heat and dryness. Okay, next slide. Okay, and we actually see that pattern continuing as we move into now next week and next weekend. We see that pattern continuing, still expecting below average temperatures for much of the region. And in terms of precipitation, we see southern portions of the region, especially Florida, trending wetter than average. And if we go to the next slide, and we look a bit further out into mid-May, we start to see maybe some subtle shifts in the pattern. We see below average temperatures still favored, especially across the northern tier of the region. So that cooler signal maybe lingers there for a few more weeks. But further south, especially across Florida and the northern Gulf Coast, we begin to see a return of above average temperatures. In terms of precipitation, a wetter than normal pattern is still favored for much of the region, except for South Florida, where conditions may turn drier as we head into the middle part of the month. All right, so we should have the summary slide here next. Yep, so you can take a look at that after the webinar. As always, I want to acknowledge our service climatologist, William Schmitz. He does a wonderful job every month helping put this presentation together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Haley for our water resources update.
Hi, I'm Haley. I'm a hydrometeorologist at the Southeast River Forecast Center. I'm going to go ahead and get into it. So next slide, please. So as Chris mentioned, rainfall over the past 30 days has been severe. Looking at our deficits on the right, you can, or percentage of normal, all those red colors are areas that have seen less than a quarter of what's normal for the month. And those dark red colors in southeastern Georgia into South Carolina are areas that have seen less than 5% of what's normal for the month. how that impacts stream flows, you can see those areas across pretty much the entirety of our area of responsibility seeing either below down to extremely below. In fact, over half of our area, about 64%, is seeing extremely below normal 28-day average stream flows. The only exception here, again, as Chris mentioned, is kind of central and South Florida, where several fronts kind of were slow moving or stalled a little bit and brought some much needed rainfall, and that has kept stream flows there a little bit closer to normal. And just as a reminder, as a disclaimer, this 28-day average stream flow anomaly graphic is generated internally using USGS stream flow data, but it is our generated image, and so the stream flow anomaly data presented here are. Next slide, please. So again, that same disclaimer applies to these slides as well. These were generated by us, and so the data are provisional. Looking at the average runoff for the states, you can see a pretty sharp drop-off for this month for Alabama and Georgia, and we're now seeing areas that have minimum stream flows for this time, getting below that record minimum. Again, Florida is an exception, but this graphic here to keep something this applies to the whole state. So it's not really showing that kind of dichotomy between central and South Florida, the northern areas of Florida that are exceptionally dry. Next slide, please. And the same trends are applying in the Carolinas and Virginia as well. You can see that steep drop off this month, and all three states are seeing minimums for this time in terms of stream flow. And next slide, please. So all that said, it's not really any surprise that we're seeing no flooding right now. And we haven't in a while. We've seen maybe 1 or 2 action stages, but right now we are green across the entire region, which is somewhat unusual as we head out of what is our climatological flood season. And speaking of that, next slide, please. So we are in week 18 of the year, which is we're on the downward slope of what is our normal flood season here in the southeast. And like I mentioned before, we kind of escaped the season with much of anything. We had maybe a few minor floods, but not nearly what we normally see for this time of year. And entering into that downward trend as we get into the drier summer months. So it's not ideal that we have left our normal recharge season without much rain and are now super dry and entering into what is climatologically a drier part of the year for us. And next slide, please. Looking specifically at Florida's flood climatology, this is a drier part of the year for them. However, we are they're more wet season, a lot drier than normal, and a lot of these floods in Florida typically come from tropical systems. So it'll be interesting to see as we get into tropical season if the predicted El Nino has any effect on that or dampens any of that activity. And next slide, please. Oh, that looks a little different in when I sent that in. Sorry about that. So overall conditions across the southeast river forecast center area specifically are exceedingly dry, with stream flows in the 5th percentile down to all-time lows. And even though we have some portions of our area outlooked with chances for above normal rainfall heading into the summer months, soils are so dry that what rain does fall will likely have a harder time converting to runoff and making it into the river systems. And we will need well above normal rainfall to provide any sort of relief for the drought they were seeing. as I mentioned before, an additional thing to keep in mind is that with Florida, a lot of our floods come from tropical systems, and we'll have to keep in mind the potential effects of the El Nino on that. And so, yes. So this is my summary slide, and I'll let y'all choose to read that later if you wish, but I will go ahead now and pass it off.
All right, thank you, Haley. This is Pam Knox talking about agricultural impacts. I woke up this morning to thunder, and there is no better sound for a climatologist in the middle of a drought, for sure. I'm so optimistic I'm wearing my waterproof shoes today. So let's jump right in and take a look at the agricultural impacts. As you can imagine, there's quite a few of them. I couldn't fit them all on here, but this is a summary of all the ones I've been hearing about. I think in general, the story is that the crops in areas that have irrigation are mostly doing okay. I mean, they're having to pump a lot of water, but some of the crop pictures I've seen look pretty good as long as they've got that irrigation. Areas that don't have irrigation are in really bad condition. Heard a story this morning about a field that was planted in, I think in Lawrence County, Georgia, that they put seed in the ground and it's just sitting there rotting because there's no moisture for it to germinate. So, that's really going to be a loss for them. We know that irrigation is expensive and they're starting to worry about water levels in some of the shallower wells. Farm ponds are drying up and about 25% of the irrigation comes from farm ponds. So that's also a critical thing. A lot of the dryland farmers have just held off on planting, but at some point you either have to plant or switch to something else. And so in some cases, they're switching from something like corn to soybeans. Others are just not going to plant at all because it's just so expensive to do that. And, all the other inputs that have to go in, like fertilizer and diesel as well. I want to thank William Schmitz for pointing out the freeze in Virginia mountains. In the vineyards there, they had temperatures that went down to about 25 degrees. So they lost a lot of their production for this year because of that. So I tend to look more at the southern part of the region since I'm in Georgia, and I don't want to forget that there's agricultural impacts up there as well. One of the good things about the dry conditions has meant that there's low disease pressure this year in many crops. But if you're putting on pre-emergent herbicides, they usually need some rainfall or moisture to work with, and they are not working. Forage is really one of the big stories, I think, this year. It's very poor to non-existent. There's a story from Oglethorpe County that said they were rotating their cows through the different fields, but after the cows went from one field to the next, the grass wasn't growing back. And so they're having to buy a lot of hay. I've heard some producers say they're having to buy hay from out of state, or they're getting rid of cattle because they just can't afford to feed them. Harvesting of crops like blueberries is going on. There is some notice that there has been some frost damage to the appearance of the blueberries, and so that makes them worth a little bit less. But overall, I think the yields are pretty good. And of course, you've noticed, I'm sure, the wildfires in South Georgia that are spreading. A lot of those are spreading in areas where there was tree damage from Hurricane Helene 2 years ago, and all those trees, just fell down to the ground. They're all tangled up, or it was so expensive to harvest them that they just left them there. And with the dry conditions, they've really served as a source of fuel. And so there's burn bans in a lot of the state, and just hopefully we'll get some rain soon. They're out there, but a lot of these fires are really not controlled yet at all. So that's something that is related to the weather as well. And of course, in the south, pine forests like the one pictured here in the bottom left are an agricultural crop in many respects. So let's go on to the next slide. And you can see here's our regular maps of the soil temperature and soil moisture. Soil temperature is still above normal, not quite as much as above normal as it was last month, but still definitely quite warm. And the soil moisture map is just heartbreaking to look at because this is the top 1 meter of soils, and it is down at 2% level almost everywhere in the region, except for in the Florida Panhandle and a little bit of Alabama. And so that is just really, that's the story of agriculture right now. There's just no soil moisture there. If we go on, the lowest temperature since March, since we did have that frost event up in Virginia and North Carolina. You can see the lowest one-day minimum for the last 30 days is shown on the left-hand side there. And there's definitely anywhere that it's blue, the minimum temperature was below 30, which of course is in the frost range. And that still covers not only the mountains, but a lot of Western North Carolina and most of Virginia. So they're not exactly in the growing season yet. They're getting there. I don't know that I haven't seen another frost that's likely to happen in the next month. So we may be at the end of the freezing season there now. But still, if you look at the statistics of frost on the right-hand side, in those light purple counties, in 1 in 10 years, they get frost the last week of April. And so they're not entirely out of the climatological possibilities yet, although the forecasts don't seem to show that we're likely to get any more. But the damage is already done, unfortunately, for a lot of those vineyards and other producers in that part of the region. If we go on, and this just shows the first bloom indices from the National Phenology Network. You can see that everywhere in the southeast is now past the first bloom, except for a really tiny area that looks like it's sort of on the West Virginia border, white there. But everything else, except for the very highest peaks, has now seen the blooms, and everything is growing like crazy. Next slide. Growing degree days, base 50 for corn. You can see it's ahead of values. The graph on the left-hand side is for Tifton. You can go and look at that at Agroclimate. Clyde's going to talk more about Agroclimate in a minute, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. You can see we're pretty close to where we were last year, although last year we had a lot of growing degree days early in the season, then it got cooler later in the season with a lot of rain, and so it slowed down. This year is kind of the opposite. We started out wetter and then got really hot and dry later in the spring. And so the likelihood is that we're going to continue to stay above the long-term average. And not surprising because our temperatures are going up. And so that is something we're watching. Also, I think of interest is that the solar radiation is much higher than usual this year too, because it's been so cloudless. We're getting a lot of clouds. For those farmers who got their corn in and have irrigation, I'm sure that the corn is going crazy because they just love solar radiation, and so they're probably ahead of the usual conditions right now. We go to the next slide. This is a little preview of what Clyde's going to talk about. This is the growing degree day departure from normal, base 50 for the whole region, and it's from the Agroclimate website that Clyde's going to be talking about in just a minute. You can see everywhere the growing degree days is above the long-term average because everywhere is yellow or red. And so that is at least in part because the temperatures have been really high. And so the growing degree days also are high. And I think my next slide is the summary slide. And so, yeah, there you go. So you can look at that later. Overall, we're still looking at drought. The rain is great. I think the rain we're getting up here in Georgia today is probably not going to make it to South Georgia. You've got a better chance tomorrow, but the models are all over the place. So some say, yes, you're going to get rain. Some say no. There do seem to be the likelihood of more rain coming up later in the week. So hopefully we'll all get some rain. I think later in the week and on into next week, they think the wettest conditions are going to be in the southern part of the region. So that's good for those farmers that are in really bad shape. So with that, let me turn it over to Clyde and say I'm looking forward to hearing more about the agroclimate.
Thank you. Thanks, Pam. Let me try to share my PowerPoint, and then I'll try a demo of the site after the PowerPoint. Let me see if I can do this now. Can you all see the screen on?
Yeah, Clyde, we can see it.
Okay, good. Hope you can see the PowerPoint now. All right. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to share more information about agroclimate. A little bit of history. Agroclimate, in fact, started a long time ago, like 20 years ago. It was a grant from the Risk Management Agency. And the idea was to develop some risk management tools for specialty crops that at the time were considered underserved by crop insurance. So that's how we started. And later on, it grew up. A lot of things were added to the system because of the Southeast Climate Consortium that involved several universities in the Southeast, including University of Georgia, and Pam also helped with that at that time. Nowadays, it's managed by us here. We keep it alive and moving forward with some of the tools. And the idea is really to, I never forgot what I heard from a farmer one time, that they want solutions. So that's why I highlighted the idea of solutions there, because they're really looking for information, but also solutions for the problems they have. So let me go back. I think I went too far. Sorry about that. Okay, so just to kind of set the stage for agroclimate here, I think that everyone agrees that there is a really urgent need to increase the climate resilience in our agricultural lands. I mean, we can see that every day extreme weather events are becoming more, happening more often, and this has become a need. And I always wonder, how do we do that? The decision support is just one piece of this puzzle. We do need many more ideas if we want to really accomplish what we're trying to do. And the number one is increase the climate literacy of extension agents and crop consultants, and of course the farmers. And this is something that webinars like this one can really help. So we need to do more of this. Then, of course, we can implement more management practices that are increasing the resilience, like increasing soil health, cover crops, and many other things that we can think of. Even irrigation, like Pam mentioned, farmers that have irrigation this year, they are in good shape because the conditions are really good if you have the water. Of course, we need to improve our monitoring systems. And this is where I feel a little bit concerned many times, because it's very common that we hear farmers talking about installing a weather station. They want to install a weather station. They want some of our tools to run in their weather data, with their weather data. But I always have been concerned about the maintenance, the accuracy of the data that they provide, and sometimes we cannot even get the data. So it's always a problem. But definitely we need to improve our monitoring systems. And of course, modeling is important. We really need to run what-if scenarios, and anything that we can do to better understand the impacts of the current climate or the current weather conditions in the crop, the better we are. But of course, we don't expect any farmer or even the extension agents to run models. That's why we need the decision support systems, because that will translate the results into a more meaningful and easy to understand and quick answers that they're looking for. And of course, I also think that we can look at some of the crop insurance products that we have. I think there are opportunities to improve some of that. So basically, this is a long list, but I want to go over it just to give you an idea that decision support is not all. And what I highlighted here is the areas that we have been more active in the last few years. So just moving forward with this, I do feel like our mission is really to increase the value and the action of weather data, weather and climate data, I would say. And if we look at the very beginning of the left side here, where we have what we call the descriptive analytics, this is the data. It could either be a weather station or it could be gridded data. But the fact is that many times when I see a weather station on a farm, I ask, well, what do you use this data for? And many times it's just descriptive. Oh, I know how much it rained, what's the temperature, or many times they're looking at the spraying conditions, and that's is going to drive an action. But most of the time it's just descriptive. So with the models, we can actually start looking at scenarios, understanding, and do more what we call the predictive analytics, and see what sort of actions we might be able to take. But the bottom line is really the prescriptive, where we actually have an action. And the value is really there, but sometimes we need so much to get to that point, and it doesn't show in the background, but in the background there is a lot of action going on in terms of looking at the data and manipulating it so that we can make a decision. Nowadays, it's an easy way to refer to that, and we hear that with the AI as well as data layer, knowledge layer, but we actually want to get to the action layer there. So that's the point where I'm going to stop here and try to go to the presentation. Maybe I'll go a little bit further just not to show the screen from the website itself. It's easier. Show the menu from the website. It's easy if we just see it from here. Agroclimate really includes many aspects, and some of them are extension materials, for instance, where we have several climate fact sheets. But the tools is where we are focusing always. And we try to divide that in different categories. And some of them are more like climate indicators, where we look at the basic information and translate that into something like Pam mentioned, like growing degree days or chill accumulation, which is really an important factor for us here in the Southeast. And but also we have some of the other tools that we develop are more related to pests and diseases. And those are more action-driven tools, I would say, and they really are more popular depending on the time of the year. And some are more related to crop development, crop yield, just looking at sometimes just NAS statistics for county level yield, and how does that compare to the weather conditions at that time, and some other things that we develop through time. But let me go and try to move to the website here. I believe we're still seeing the screen there. So like I was mentioning, perhaps I will start with this one, which is the newest tool that we have, and we're still testing it in many aspects. But this one is what we call the climate indicators tool. And it starts with basic maps. I mean, we can look at, this is the total or the accumulated precipitation during the last 30 days. And you can change that for different time frames, but 15 days or 30 days. And this is based on PRISM data, if you are wondering about that. And the idea here is that we start with this basic information, but we can go into more specific data, like the drought index arid, for instance, which is basically a soil water balance, where we calculate it daily for a reference crop like grass, and we can see areas of the U.S. In fact, it runs for the entire U.S. Where you have more or less stress. And when it's an index that varies, a drought index that varies from 0 to 1, and 1 would be the maximum stress, where there is no water available in the root zone to supply the crop, and 0 will when there is enough water to supply the entire demand for that particular day. And so in most of the time, it's going to be somewhere in between. But of course, the areas where you see towards the red would be the areas that have more stress. And there are some other maps, like Pam mentioned, the growing degree days as well. You can map this, and you can look at deviation for that particular variable, deviation from the long-term average. And the long-term average that I'm talking here is the PRISM data that goes back to 1981. But this is interesting, but that's certainly not the what would make it extremely useful for the decision. So we can actually go to more specific data sets and look at, for instance, if I am in Gainesville, Florida, and I have a farm here, or a blueberry farm or whatever that is, I can click at this, drop a pin, and click in any point in the map, and it will give you some basic statistics to start with. It starts with the last 30 days. You can change that, but it gives you, to begin with, some statistics about the accumulated rainfall. And what you can see here is, since 1981, what was the rainfall accumulated during that particular time frame that we selected here. And you can change this to different periods of time if you want to. So if we want to go to 1st of January and see the same information now, you can look at this, and it will give you some summary here. What was the wettest year? 1982, with almost 24 inches. On average, we should get about 13 inches in this location since the beginning of the year. The driest was at this time in 89, before this current year, which we are actually in the driest year of all of those, with 3.81 inches. And the same you have for temperature and other minimum and maximum temp as well. This is interesting, but I normally like to look at the deviation map, and this will give you more informed situation about this year, for instance, where we are almost 9.1 inches below the long-term average for this particular location. So we start getting a more clear picture. What is the temperature? It's always interesting to me when I look at the winter, especially winter temperature in Florida. We see that the minimum has been above average since 2015 or so. That's when I think we kind of changed everything. There was that big El Nino 2015, 16. And I heard some talks that perhaps if we have a super El Nino this year, we might change or go to a different level as well. But this is what I see here. It's very common to see that the maximum not always show a positive deviation like I'm seeing here, but the minimum does show that. It's very common to see that. But still, we are looking at basic data, but not really much informed if you're looking at make a decision. So we can go now to the indicators tab here, where you can actually look at several indicators, and those are either physical or phenological or stress indicators. In this case, I have growing degree days because that was the map that was selected there, and I can even change that to a different base temperature if I want. So I do have the trend. Let me see here. Wait a second. I'm seeing more than I need to see. Long growing degree days. Okay. There's an extra line here that I'm not sure what it is. Well, this I can see the trends, but it's just for this few days, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, this will show you different indicators for that particular location, and you can again change the time frame that you are interested. So this gives you I'm seeking chill here. This brings data from ACES, in fact, and takes a little bit of time when I'm looking at chill, because we calculate chill portions, which is a bit more complex than chill hours, and this may take a little bit of time. Let's hope it goes. Sorry about that. Let me try to go back here and get to a more simplistic view of this. Oops, it seems that we're stuck. Go back to. Okay, let's go back to indicators. Okay, let me choose Precipitation, we always think, nowadays, I think that there's nothing, it's not showing, but it's just that because it doesn't have any, yeah. Okay, so to make it short, it's always difficult when trying to make real-time demos here, but you can select different values and even look at, depending on the variable, you can accumulate that and compare to long-term average. So now you can see the precipitation is well below what would be the long-term average there. So just to try to, at least with this, to end it, one of the things we notice is that you may wanna, you can, if you want, to have a virtual weather station, but this, of course, you would have to create an account. But what it happens is that you can look at establish a virtual weather station, and you don't have to find your place all the time. So I have one where is my house? It's called home, of course, and this is the statistics. So I can have all the data for my particular location without having to go to the map and find it again. So you can have also a virtual weather station installed there. So this is, like I said, a new tool that we are testing. But perhaps one thing I can show here that it's an evolution of this is the disease. This is really popular with growers, especially strawberry and blueberry growers here in Florida, is the disease risk for different crops. And I think Penn mentioned this as well. This will give you the risk for the disease, and you can change the date, the interval of dates here. But you can see that basically we haven't had much of a disease risk. I think the berry growers in Florida would be extremely happy this year if it wasn't for the freeze in early February that really created some damage for them. But the disease has been very low risk. And one thing that we are adding now is this ability to look at using a virtual weather station for disease, because one of the challenges we have has been to provide the same information to locations that are not close to a Florida Weather Network, for instance, station, or any station that we can trust. So we are now testing the idea of using virtual weather stations. I mean, there are so many other things that I could talk about Agroclimate and the extension materials, the fact sheets that we have, and many other things and tools. But I think I will just and like links for the seasonal forecast that was already presented here, or to the precipitation short-term forecast that always is mentioned as well. But there are many tools here, and there's certainly not time enough to talk about it. But I just want to let you know that Agroclimate is available, and I believe that if you are involved in agriculture, you may find something useful to you over here. So let me stop sharing it now. And if you have any questions or suggestions, we'll be happy to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all our presenters today. My name is Elliot Wickham. I am the Southeast Drought Early Warning System Coordinator for NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS. Thank you again to our speakers. Great information from Clyde about agroclimate today, and as always, great updates, although maybe not the best news from the updates with the drought going on, but needed and great information from Pam, Haley, and Chris. If you have any questions, please put them in the Slido Q&A.
Elliot, I see one there, so let me take that.
Sure, go for it. Yeah.
And James Lewis Free wrote to ask if I could comment on which non-irrigated crops are likely to have the biggest negative impacts from the spring drought, either row crops or produce. One of the issues with peanuts and other commodity crops like that is you put it in the ground and you got one crop for the year. And the peanut market has been odd this year. There's still quite a few peanuts left from last year. So, either you put it in the ground soon or you don't have a peanut crop for this year. So I really think there's a lot of negative impacts from that. The ground has been so hard, it's been difficult to get planting equipment into the fields. And so I think with produce, well, for one thing, more produce is irrigated, but even if it's not, I think you've got more shorter growing seasons. You can maybe pivot a little bit to other produce products if you need to. My gut feeling is, and I am not a producer here, so I don't have any money in the game, is that peanuts are probably going to have the biggest negative impacts. But it's could be bad either way. It just really depends. But I have seen those comments about the risk to the peanut crop in South Carolina, and it's definitely a concern. And then I see another question from Lee Ellenberg. Have I heard of any farmers lacking water for irrigation? I have heard of a few from people who use farm ponds. Farm ponds, a lot of the farm ponds, especially in South Georgia, are getting really low. I've seen a few pictures where they're gone. And if you're a small-time farmer and you use a farm pond for irrigation, that's very difficult. There were some questions during the fruit growing season about irrigation for freezing protection. And some people were worried about if everybody in the whole neighborhood is drawing water at the same time for freeze protection, is that going to be an issue? I haven't heard of anybody running out of water from that, but I think that could certainly be a factor. If we continue in drought, it's going to take a long time. If we get rain now, it's got to make all the way down the column to get back into the aquifers. So it's going to take a long time for those to really recover. And in the meantime, people are still going to want to be using it. So I think that's going to be an issue. I haven't seen any restrictions on the groundwater use yet. Georgia just put drought level 1 into effect, but that's just education. That is not any restrictions on how you use the water. It's just trying to be smart about how you use it. And then there's another question. I'm going to leave that, I think, to Chris.
Yeah, Chris, there's a
here at I'm just looking at I had the other chat up, not the slide. Apologies.
no worries.
Could you send a printout or link where the stats on the record set? Yes, I can. I'm not sure about. We are going to share the slide deck. I don't know if we can make modifications to that, but if you need any sort of textual references for all the numbers and locations that I provided, I can certainly get that to you.
Yeah, and I'll also say, Chris, your email was on the slides too. So if we have trouble getting the links out or anything, this person that's asked a question, I assume they're more than welcome to reach out to you or William and ask for those. So.
Yeah, for sure. The links on each slide at the bottom of all of my slides, there are links to the resources that I use to get the information on those slides. So climate perspectives, a lot of our ACES, a lot of the tools that are built off of the Applied Climate Information System. That's where I get probably 99% of the climate related stats. The drought monitor stats are from the US Drought Monitor, and that website is also at the bottom of the slide too. But if we need that information sort of packaged a little bit better for you, we can certainly provide that.
Awesome. I think it was put in the chat there, but we'll make sure that gets out. Mm-hmm. And then another question that got asked, we recently learned about the USGS's 90-day streamflow forecast tool. Is this the first year that this forecast has been publicly released, and is it something that or a product that you all follow? So yes, the first question, or the first answer to that is that was just released this year. The launch was in March, I believe, of this year. So that's a brand new tool. So I would say that it's still for lack of a better term, like still hitting the streets. It's getting itself into the network of how people are using it and looking at it for data. And I would ultimately say, yes, this is definitely a product that people are starting to use more as we're, considering, impacts. I would say with any, just like with any product that's out there, you have to know how to use it and use it as a suite of, with a suite of products, not just look at one thing to make your decision about what level of drought you're in. But it does provide an approach to looking forward and seeing how stream flow values may change on a percentile component, not necessarily in a flow value. So it's just going to give you that percentile for that time frame it's looking at, not necessarily the exact flow metric. But it is definitely something that's being used more and more, at least in the conversations in the Southeast, and I think it's being used in other areas as well. Let's see. Check if we have any other questions. Still got a few minutes if somebody wants to add any more questions. But I will say that our next webinar is going to be a little bit different. So it's going to be on May 19th is what we're looking at. So 1 week earlier than we usually do these. We're not doing it this year in May on the 4th Tuesday of the month. That's the day after Labor Day. So we're doing it a week early. And this is going to be specifically about the drought in the Southeast. I know it looks like we may move into a little bit of a rainier pattern, which would be helpful. But as many had suggested, that it's not just going to take one little wetter pattern to get us out of this. We're going to need a lot. We're going to need a sustained wetter pattern for multiple weeks, maybe even a month or two, to see real gains in soil moisture and hydrology. And so we are going to cover the Southeast drought, both in terms of what caused this, how it compares to past events, going over sectoral impacts, both and state regional responses, and what it will take to get out of this drought, future outlooks as we go forward. So if you can, please tune into that. It'll be a little bit different than our normal makeup for our Southeast webinar, but we look forward to chatting about the drought situation, bringing everyone together. I don't see any other chats in Slido, so we're at the top of the hour, but if you have any questions about this webinar, please feel free to email me at elliot.wickham@noaa.gov. And I'd be happy to answer your questions or direct you to the right place. Thank you for joining today, and we'll see you on May 19th. Thank you.